My name is Don Lindberg, and I'm the director of the National Library of Medicine. I'm delighted that today our guest is Dr. Michael DeBakey, Chancellor Emeritus of Baylor College of Medicine and a member of the Board of Regents of the National Library of Medicine. Dr. DeBakey, you have been a good friend of the National Library and of me for many, many years, and I'm really pleased that you're here.
Thank you.
In this case, we want to talk a little bit about the history of the National Library and the very significant role you played in it. So I'm equipped with some props. Now, this particular prop you hadn't seen before. This is a brick from the old red brick building
I'm familiar.
where the library was many, many years ago.
Yes, I can see that very well.
And this, I know, is where you first encountered the library.
Absolutely.
I wonder if you'd tell a little bit about that.
Well, I had, in World War II, I was brought into the Army as a captain, and I was assigned at the request of the chief consultant in surgery, Rankin, Fred Rankin, who was then the chief consultant of surgery to the Surgeon General in the Army here in Washington, to come up and work in his office. And so, you know, I had had no military medical experience whatever, and all of a sudden, suddenly thrust into this position of having to prepare documents and policy issues, and I didn't know anything about it, and I'd have to go down to the library and learn.
Yeah.
So I got to using the library a great deal, so I spent a good deal of time down there, and I got to know the library very well. And after a while, I became, you know, I developed a sort of affection for that library, browsing through the books. And at the end of the war, I became concerned about the future of that building and the library itself. Here was the greatest collection of medical literature in the world, and it was not being properly taken care of. And I felt more and more this was a national treasure. And unfortunately, I felt that the Army was not able to maintain it. And this was evident from when I asked about the building, because I said, you know, here was this old building with a roof that leaked when it rained. They had to put tarpaulins over the stacks of books. It had an outhouse. It was really sort of...
Did the outhouse work pretty well?
Poorly. So I asked why is it why they hadn't at least gotten a new building. And they said they had been, the Surgeon General said to me, he said, we've been putting it in a request for 30 years. We simply haven't been able to compete with tanks. So that made it, you know, that impressed me with the fact that it no longer belonged in the armed forces in the Army. And I started making indications that it ought to be a national treasure, should be outside of the Army. And at first, of course, you can imagine there was a considerable amount of resistance. But two things happened that made it later possible. One is that the medical task force of the Hoover Commission was headed by a man by the name of Tracy Voorhees. And I got to know him during World War II because I worked under him, even though he was in the National General's office, and the publication of publication called Health at that time, which was done by the Surgeon General, but went through the Surgeon General's office. So I got to know him quite well. So when he became chairman of that medical task force of the Hoover Commission, he asked me if I would work for him virtually as sort of an executive of that task force. So I came up and spent, nearly 9 months up here in Washington, full time, took a leave of absence from the university, Tulane University then, and really virtually prepared the report. And I prepared in that report a recommendation about the National Library of Medicine, among others. And I was fortunate because when he asked me to go with him to meet with Herbert Hoover to brief him on the report, I went up to New York with him. Herbert Hoover was staying in the Plaza Hotel there. And
not the Waldorf?
I mean the Waldorf Hotel. And he had an apartment. We had lunch with him. Yeah. And he was browsing through the report, and he said, you know how many task forces I've got? And Tracy Voorhees said, no, sir. He said, well, you know, I've got about 50 task forces. if everybody came in here with 20 or 30 recommendations, who's going to read this report? And he asked to give him the single most important recommendation. And I immediately blurted out the library.
Good for you.
And fortunately, that went into the report. And then it was picked up in Congress after the report came out by Lister Hill in the Senate and John Kennedy in the House. And they began working on the legislation and really got quite a good support. And just before the National Democratic Convention was to be held that year, in the mid-50s, 52, 53, something like that, 54, 55, I've forgotten. Anyway, the people from Chicago in the House and Senate began to lobby for having the library built in Chicago next to the AMA. This, of course, was the AMA lobbying for it. We wanted it here in Washington. And so Lister Hill called me on one occasion and said, the House Speaker, Sam Rayburn from Texas, is holding it up for that reason. He didn't want to have a quarrel before the Democratic Convention. And he said, is there anyone you know that has some influence with Rayburn? And I didn't.
By that time, had you moved to Texas?
I moved to
barely,
Texas by that time, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I found out there wasn't a great deal of influence with Rayburn, but I did suddenly realize when he told me about the Democratic Convention that I'd operated on the husband of the Secretary of the National Democratic Party. Her name was Dorothy Lindberg. So I called her and asked her if she would persuade Rayburn to, because Lister Hill said, we have the votes if we can get if we get Rayburn to let the bill come through. We could get the bill approved and get the library bill approved. And I explained to her the situation. And she said she'd see what she could do. The next day she called me and she said, Rayburn said he would do it.
Yeah.
And that's how we got
That's pretty interesting. Well, I have to say, I think the library belongs in Washington, and Bethesda, and it's done real well.
Oh, absolutely.
Actually, you've told me on one other occasion that the site of the library was a golf course or some such thing.
Yeah, that's right.
You actually kind of surveyed that site, didn't you, as well?
Well, we came out here, actually. The Board of Regents, once it was established after the bill was passed and it was approved.
Maybe I should show you this picture of the board.
Yeah.
That'll be a reminder.
Yeah.
There you are, replete with a mustache at that moment.
Right there, yeah, you can see me in a mustache. Yeah, this is Rogers, who was our first director. And this is the Board of Regents at that time. And we came out here to look for the site, you know, and there was a little golf course in this general area. We thought this was a good site for it, right, virtually as a part of the National Institutes of Health complex, which we felt was desirable to be in the complex. Because I think it is a part of a research activity. You know, the library compilations and the literature is essential to any research activity. So it's a very important place for it to be. And I think it has prospered for that reason, too.
Oh, absolutely, sure. It's a wise decision. Pity you lost the golf course, though.
Yeah. Well, personally, I think that this is a very good use of the golf course. Much better use than it was originally.
Well, you probably remember him better than I, because he was quite an old man when I first met him. But here's a picture of Senator Lister Hill.
Yeah, he was a remarkable man, who, Senator Lister Hill, who really became a very powerful force for medical research and medical activities. And he was himself personally interested in medicine because of the fact that his father, in fact, that's why he's called Lister. His father was a sort of general practitioner in Alabama, and his father was quite I think, an active person in the field, and had a sort of a sense of history. He was very impressed with Lister, particularly in terms of the development of the concept of asepsis and antisepsis, one of the first to use it in this country. Yeah. And was so admired Lister so much that he named his first son, Lister Hill. His father was the first one to do a successful repair of a heart wound in this country.
Yeah, that's
Rain
amazing.
in Germany had done the first one in 1895. And his father, 1901 or 2, something like that, operated on a young black boy who had been stabbed in the heart on the atrium. And he did it on a kitchen table, somebody else holding a kerosene lamp.
Wow.
And it was successful.
What was their approach to anesthesia?
I think he used chloroform, but I'm not sure. Yeah. It's in the report. He wrote a report on it.
I think we better give a little more prominence to that story. That's remarkable. I didn't know that Senator
he was a remarkable
Hill was that
person.
connected.
I think he and Fogarty was in the House, and Lester Hill was in the Senate. The two of them teamed together so beautifully and had a tremendous impact upon the development of the National Institutes of Health.
Now, there's another person that I think about in this teamwork. This is a picture from a little bit later period, but that's Mary Lasker, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Mary Lasker, and that's so typical of her. There she is, striding, I'm sure, with me. She's, you know, making me tag along. She's striding, I'm sure, to have some lobbying effect in Congress for medical research. And she was responsible, another thing from the library standpoint, she was really responsible for Lyndon Johnson appointing the Commission on Heart Disease, Cancer, and Stroke.
Ah, I didn't know that.
And yeah, she was responsible for it. And as a consequence of that commission, the regional library, the whole concept of the regional library was established. Because that was an essential part of that commission report, the regional library. And that was one of the things that was picked up by Congress and supported very actively, and of course had tremendous impact in the country.
For many years and in a different context, but on more than one occasion I've heard Claude Pepper, Senator Pepper, refer to Mary Lasker as an angel on earth. He was very devoted to her. Was he part of this
and he was a great supporter, too, of medical research and the library.
Now, I have a picture. Again, you don't need these remembrances as much as I do, but this is a picture of the White House. I guess it's the Rose Garden, and there's
That's exactly right. That's the picture of the Rose Garden when the Commission on Heart Disease, Cancer, and Stroke was established.
There's President Johnson, and there you are, in the center.
Yeah, you can see me right there.
You've gotten rid of the mustache.
Yeah, by that time I'd gotten older.
You've gotten older.
I didn't need the mustache.
Didn't need to put on years.
No.
Yeah. Now, that was a hard thing to do, that commission, but he asked you to do it in a big hurry, as I recall.
That's right. He wanted it completed within, actually within less than a year, in about 9 months. And we did.
Before this year is gone, over 1 million productive citizens will have been killed by 3 murderous diseases. 7 out of 10 Americans who lose their lives this year will be the victims of heart disease or cancer or stroke.
You did it, yeah. So maybe it was a good idea to put the heat on you.
Yeah, I think it was. As a matter of fact, we met very regularly. I spent more time up here than I did at home during the time the commission was in operation. And it really, I think, looking back, I have to say that I think that among the various things that were reported, the regional library was probably had the most impact. The regional medical library.
I think so too. As you and I have discussed in another interview, the regional medical program was something that was your idea, part of the commission report, something I found tremendously exciting, but that didn't last, regrettably, and the medical library assistants did.
Well, it didn't last, I think, largely because it was a concept that the medical profession in general didn't particularly like, because they thought it was leading to socialized medicine. When in truth, I don't think it would. You know, I think Medicare had more effect than the regional medical program had in that regard.
Yeah, I regret that sincerely. Now here's I think the end of that 9 months where you're giving President Johnson the report.
We're giving him a copy of the report and briefing him over it. And it's very interesting.
In the 9 months, you've gotten to look younger.
Yeah.
Probably that work agreed with you.
Well, it was exciting work, there's no question. And we had a wonderful commission, really. They were dedicated. They really worked hard on it. And we divided the responsibility among the commission members into a number of subcommittees. And they prepared reports and had regular meetings. And the report itself, you know, the documentation that supports the report is presented by the various subcommittees. But I must say, President Johnson was very supportive of the report and its recommendation, and he did his best to try to implement it with whatever legislation he could advance, and he did.
We already carry on a large program in this country for research and health. In addition, regional medical centers can provide the most advanced diagnosis and treatment for heart disease and cancer and stroke and other major diseases.
And fortunately, we had, at that particular time, good support from Congress. And they went right along with the recommendations.
I could ask, how often did it meet? How did you organize the work? I mean, it was a big success.
Yeah, well, we met...
Maybe there's a lesson to be learned.
we met, the subcommittees met more frequently than the whole commission.
Oh.
And I would meet with various subcommittees as chairman. I would meet one subcommittee and then another subcommittee, and I'd sort of rotate with them.
Whole bunch meet 3 times, or is that the usual?
Oh, more than that. We had a meeting of the commission itself. I think about every 6 weeks the whole commission met.
Ah.
And the subcommittees met even more frequently.
So you kept the momentum up then?
Yes. Oh, yes. It was going at a fast pace.
Now here is a picture from a later time, Mary Lasker and you, of course, but also Tip O'Neill.
Yes.
How did that, what was the occasion there? Oh,
Well,
you were giving awards, probably Lasker awards.
These are Lasker awards, and they were being given, and Tip O'Neill was there to give the luncheon speech.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a great supporter of our activities too. He was very fond of Mary Lasker.
I was too. She's done a lot of
good. She was a
good.
great lady.
Yeah.
Really had a tremendous influence, I think, in expanding the research activities. Some of the institutes that we now have really stemmed from the initial efforts she made to get them established. And she would call me from time to time, ask me to meet on here in Washington. We'd walk the halls of Congress lobbying for these activities. She was well received by the congressmen. They all had high esteem for her, recognized her dedication, unselfishness, her willingness to be dedicated to medical research, because she felt that was the one way we were going to improve medical knowledge and control the effect of disease.
You know, one of the big changes within the National Library of Medicine, it seems to me, was the creation of Lister Hill Center for Biomedical Communications.
Oh, there's no question about it. Well, I think, to be perfectly honest, I think the establishment of the National Library of Medicine has had such a tremendous impact upon the expansion of knowledge and transmission of that knowledge. And, you know, today there's virtually no lag between new knowledge coming out of any kind of research activity and its a clinical application. And I think that the basic reason for that is what the National Library has done in providing this, you know, taking advantage of the new technology for the transmission of information. Yeah. You know, you've got Medline and MedLaws, and you've got Grateful Med, and now the Internet, and you know, the public itself has all this knowledge available to it, and they are responding to it more and more. I think that this has been a tremendous educational activity that the National Library of Medicine has done. And so I think it's responsible for more than that. You know, in the old days, the library was a collection of literature and books, and often just the preservation. Yeah. The National Library of Medicine has done a lot more to make the library a much more active force in the transmission of new information. And in a sense, in the education of not only the medical community, the public itself.
Oh, it's an active force, all right.
Very definitely.
Maybe I'll ask you this question. You won't be prepared, maybe, to give a definitive answer, but one of the things that comes up at every planning session I participated in the last 12, 13 years here is our formal commitment to serve the public through the health professions, because of a limited in resources. But everybody in medicine knowing full good and well that we have a more educated family and patients and public, and of course they should be served. Of course they want the information. How should NLM really ideally respond to that circumstance?
Well, I think, as a matter of fact, I think the response is going to have to be a positive response, because the public is going to demand it. They're already demanding it. You know yourself on the internet. There's an increasing demand. And as a matter of fact, the evidence clearly indicates, on the basis of experience with the public and the internet, that has been of some advantage to the public. They have actually obtained information through the internet from the library that has been useful to them, you know. And I think it's important that we find a way to serve the public. It's one thing to say that this is a library that is concerned with medical literature for the medical community, but it's gone beyond that now. The public itself is much more knowledgeable about medicine. You can't hardly pick up a newspaper or a magazine or even a television network without getting something about health in it, because the public is very interested in that.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. I think it's important to educate the public. And I think the library is a very important element in that. So I think that we should be prepared to respond to that need.
Well, as you know, we are doing a kind of set of experiments to find out how good a job we can do in certain areas, AIDS, for example, and toxicology and environmental health, the cancer protocols, those areas. And I would say that it's very, very difficult to serve the public as well as we now know how to serve the healthcare profession. So we're trying your advice, but it's difficult.
Yeah, I know it's difficult, but I think you're going to find that you need to do it. That's the point I'm making, because I think the public's going to demand more and more. And you know, the mere fact, you saw what happened when the public found out through Ann Landers about the internet. You know, it was almost an explosion right away.
Yeah.
And then the internet's going to be more and more available.
The internet is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in another little remembrance here. Here is another wonderful friend of the National Library of Medicine. Remember that gentleman?
Oh, no.
Mark Hatfield.
Mark Hatfield. Yeah. He was given Mayor Lasker, that's why he's there with Mayor Lasker.
Yeah.
He was given the Lasker Award because of his public service to, you might say, medical activities and support of medical activities. And he's a great friend of the libraries as well. I think it's interesting how these individuals have developed in Congress an interest in the medical community, and particularly in the support of research in the library.
Yeah.
And Hatfield is certainly one of them.
He's been a good support. Mr. Hatfield actually likes books on top of everything else, and he doesn't often let you leave his office without handling a book or seeing the latest book. He's a good friend of the libraries.
He certainly is.
Yeah.
It was a well-deserved award.
It is indeed. He's now retired from the Senate.
Yes.
We'll all miss him.
Well, fortunately, we have Porter, who is still there, and he's taken over in a way in the support of these activities.
He's been tremendously helpful.
Absolutely.
Mike, I'm going to lapse back in closing to a photo that I know most people don't know the photo exists, and they don't. No one but you knows the story behind it. But I find it really amazing, and to see a picture of you and President Johnson. And to learn from you that before the photo was taken, even though you didn't want it to be that way, Mr. Johnson had to wait for you to complete your telephone call.
Well,
I wonder if you
what
tell us that
happened was I was waiting to meet him before the briefing ceremony of the report, you see. So I was in the outer office, he was in the Oval Office, and I was waiting because he was tied up with someone. So Valenti, who was then his chief of staff, came to me and said there's a phone call from New York from a doctor about the Duke of Windsor, and it's urgent, and we'd like for you to take it right now. So I went over to talk to the doctor, Antoniti was his name, and he was telling me about the Duke of Windsor having an aneurysm of the abdominal aorta, and he wanted to send him down right away. So while I was doing that, the person who was holding up President Johnson left, so now President Johnson was waiting on me. But he was
had to be told you were busy dealing with the Duke.
Yeah, but he was very nice about it. I explained to him what the situation was, and then I had to fly right on back to Houston to take care of the Duke. But this is a picture right after finished, when I finished making the telephone call. I came in and I was briefing him a little bit on the report.
A wonderful picture, wonderful story.
Yeah.
We appreciate all that you've done for the library. Thank you very much.
It's been really a very, very great, satisfying and a great pleasure for me to see what the library has done, and particularly to see, Don, what you've done with the library, because during your tenure, you have really expanded its activity beyond anything that we had any vision of for the library. It's really extraordinary.
That's kind of you to say that.